Hello everyone, or no one, and welcome to Delvo Gaming. I'm a bad gamer, and I have tested out the game Echoes of the End, and I found this. A game that feels like The Legend of Zelda, God of War, Witcher 3, and arguably a little bit of Star Wars, all had a baby that really likes puzzle. Now that sounds like it should be awesome, right? Sometimes taking inspiration from great games can make something special. Other times it can feel like you've borrowed a little too much. Thankfully, Echoes of the End managed to carve out its own identity more often than not. This is, as far as I know, the developer's first game, and honestly, it's pretty impressive first attempt. You can tell they had a clear vision from the beginning, and they stick to it throughout the whole adventure. The world looks fantastic, whether you're climbing snowy mountains, exploring sewers, or wandering through volcanoes. Every area feels different and memorable. It never felt like I was just walking through another copy and paste location. The biggest focus of the game is solving environmental puzzles to progress through the world. And credit where it's due, they're generally well designed. Even late in the game, they introduce new mechanics and they rarely become repetitive. But there are a lot of them, and I mean puzzle, 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 protecting another puzzle, then you fight a little bit. Don't get me wrong, they're clever, but after a while I started wondering, where are all the enemies? If someone seals away an ancient artifact or something important behind a giant magical door, you'd think they hire a few guards. Instead, they've apparently trusted their entire security system to moving blocks and levers. Some puzzles made me feel clever, others made me feel, well, like me. Dumb, with a forehead sore of all the face palming. There were several moments where I spent 10 minutes searching every corner of the room, convinced I was missing some ancient magical mechanism. Turns out there was just a lever behind the wall I walked past 6 times. This is why I'm not employed as an archaeologist. The game itself isn't very long. You can comfortably finish it around 15 hours. And when the credits rolled, my biggest disappointment wasn't the ending. It was that there wasn't more. It almost feels like you're playing a middle chapter of a much bigger story. I wanted more time with these characters, more of this world, and more reasons to care about what's happening. I really liked the main character. I got attached to her almost immediately, because every time something happened, she reacted exactly the way I was thinking myself. So apparently this game has taught me that I'm actually a masculine female trapped inside an old man's body. That's good to know. I just wish we learned more about her, her brother, and the world around them. We're supposedly trying to stop a war and save a country, but you hardly meet any of the people you're actually trying to save. The villains, on the other hand, are great. Sarah is completely unhinged. She's got a few screws loose. Actually, I don't think she has any screws left, to be honest. Combat is another highlight. You have your sword, but you can mix your attacks with magic that launches enemy into the air, pushes them around, or even steals their health to heal yourself. So you're basically an Icelandic Viking vampire Jedi. That's pretty awesome. I just wish there had been more opportunities to use those abilities, because the combat is easily one of the most enjoyable parts of the game. There are some cool boss fights as well, but again, I wanted more. And now we have to talk about jumping. I'm already bad at platforming. Every game with jumping sections becomes a horror game the moment my feet leave the ground. Echoes of the End somehow made it even worse. Some puzzles rely on precise jumps and timing, and I never felt in control of where I was landing. I'm convinced Gravity and I had different opinions. They should have borrowed Mario's death sound every time I fell, or actually I'm glad they didn't, because I would hate that. The game also includes New Game Plus, which adds tougher enemies and new challenges every time you finish another playthrough. That's actually a really cool idea. The only thing stopping me from jumping back in is all the jumping, and mostly all the puzzles. If the balance had leaned a little more towards combat, I'd happily play through it again. But replaying every puzzle just to get to the fights doesn't sound nearly as tempting. So where does Echoes of the End land on the Devil Gaming scale? Honestly, I find it difficult to place this one. I'm just going to put it on a 6.5 out of 10 for now. Not because it's a bad game, because it feels like the first half of something that could have been great. It has some issues, but it also has big potential. There's a lot of talent on display here, and I'd happily support these developers if it means they get the chance to make a bigger, more ambitious sequel. And now, as always, I will leave you with the wise words of wisdom from the Steam reviews, and I bid you farewell. A fine game with fine combat, story, visuals and music. However, the game is 80% environmental puzzles. I find this sort of thing incredibly tedious. An enviro puzzle can make for fine flavor, but not a main course. This is the most underrated game of 2025. AA level. Loved every minute of it. A true vestige. The devs have implemented some really interesting ideas for platforming and traversal. Level design is awesome and on point. The combat is really good, although it borrows heavily from other games. Very good, especially for a studio's first release. A bit janky here and there, and a few bugs, but overall a great experience, and can't wait to see more from Mercury Games. I guess this is one of those 7 out of 10 games, where your enjoyment depends on how much you like the positives and how much the negatives annoy you. Echoes of the End is a game worth the time for anyone interested in mostly linear story-focused games, with a goal of tight combat and thematic puzzles. With that in mind, there are some things that may not work as well as expected. Depending on the opinion of video game market, the game may not be polished to perfection, but what exists is very enjoyable. This is nothing groundbreaking, but it's a very enjoyable AA experience. This reminds me of what I loved about games back in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I'd definitely recommend this on sale. Well done to Mercury Games, and I hope this sells well enough for us to see how they progress. Really solid AA gem here, especially for a dev's team's first game. Good story, pretty environments, fun bosses, and surprisingly large amount of variety in the game's levels, particularly in the back half.